Good afternoon. Well, first, I'd like to thank you all for being here, and I think we need to just take a moment and thank Michelle and Soren for all the wonderful ways they've been hosting this and their visionary work. Thank you. So this time together, we're going to spend looking at this notion of we, and we can put the slide up. This is a combination of the word me and the word we. And you might say, well, why would we combine them together into a weird word like we? And one of the reasons is that if we only try to go from me to we, which you'll hear a lot of people saying, in fact, I used to give talks like that, you get what one of my students, my online students who was in an in-person course, got very agitated about. She said, why would I lose the me? It's so important to know my own history, to differentiate where this body has come from, to sleep this body well, to feed this body well, to give this body exercise. And that's all the word me, an inner aspect of who we are, if you will. But we are also, in terms of our identity, an inter-experience. We are our relationships with other people and with nature, so people and the planet. And that we can just use the word we. So the reason we by itself may be not really what we're looking for is that we want to recognize the importance of inner reflection, of inner knowledge, of what's called insight, of knowing inwardly what is the history of this inner experience. So we is just a way to bring that together. Now, when we think deeply about what we are, who we are, where we are, why we're here, we're going to see that there's a way of actually addressing this for a wisdom community. And if you're working in your own inner life, or working with a one-to-one relationship, or working in a family, or working with an extended community or an organization, you'll see that there are principles that come from a field that I work in, interpersonal neurobiology, that combines all the different disciplines together into one framework. And we come with a view that the mind is not just what scientists have been telling us for a long time, and in medicine we've been saying for 2,500 years since the time of Hippocrates. But on the first slide, you'll see that we are not just what goes on in our heads in terms of the mind giving rise to a sense of self. That when you look at, for example, what Meng Tong invited us to experience at the process of energy, energy is not constrained by your skull or your skin. It is happening throughout your whole body, so that's an embodied brain. But it's also happening in your relationships with people on the planet. And when you look at the mind this way, that it's relational and embodied, you come to see that there are four facets of mind. And I'm going to just review this very briefly to get to this notion of where do we go from here, from this wisdom time together in these 3 days. How do we move out from what in a conference we're doing is called, in honor of the Garrison Institute, timely wisdom that's coming forward right now, but that has a timeless quality to it, from ancient teachings and something you know deep inside of you into timely action that also in a way is timeless. So what would that be? Well, the mind is what you feel, your subjective experience. It's your awareness of that consciousness. It's also information processing, like the ideas we're having and the experiences you've had these 3 days. And whether you're looking at experiences through the lens of our group time or inner reflection, whether you're looking at the way we come together in awe, or even with the experiences described with hallucinogens, you're talking about subjective experience and the nature of consciousness and how information is flowing. All of that can be seen as processes evolving from energy flow. And when you look at that, you realize that there's a fourth facet of mind called self-organization that actually allows, and on the next slide you'll see this, allows energy to flow through us as a hose, like a conduit, or as a constructor. This becomes very, very important because how we relate to each other, let's say in social media, is constructing energy in formation, that is information. that we come to go in the following sequence. We have categories that we make and presume in the world, concepts, and then symbols, like the symbol of the word self. So if I were to ask you to reflect right now, where is your self? Now, we have a lot of people in the room, so we can't go one by one, but it's fascinating when you do this, you get an answer where many people point to their body. And that is a construction of contemporary culture. And it is a view of a separate self that, in fact, is probably not only a constructed partial reality, it may even be a toxic lie. And I'll hope to share with you right now what we can do with that toxicity. On the next slide, you see this notion that when you see this system of energy that happens, yes, in your head, but also your whole body, but not just in your body, who you are, if it's about energy flow, is also about that flow that's happening in the relational side. And what we see from our, hi, John.
Microphone.
Oh, yes. You want me to bend this? Let's hear it for our AV people, by the way. Come here. John. All right. So, thank you. So, is this sounding better? Oh, okay, good. Good. So, the idea here is that when a system that we're talking about of who we are is flowing optimally, it's differentiating and linking. So tomorrow, if you go to Integration Day, the word integration means, bless you, differentiating and linking. Okay? This is a really important point. It's not like a smoothie, it's more like a fruit salad. You maintain the differentiated components and you link them, and that's this river of integration, which is really harmony. It has the acronym FACES. It's flexible, F, adaptive, A, coherent means resilient over time, C, it's energized and it's stable. And on one bank, you go into chaos, the other bank of your rigidity. So if you think about Paul Hawkins' magnificent talk and work, is we identify on the planet states of chaos and rigidity, which you could interpret as signs of impaired integration. What's not integrated? Humanity has come to believe that it is excessively differentiated from nature and not linked. So it's impaired integration, which is leading to the chaos and rigidity we see. What is the path ahead, the name of this conference? The path forward is to create more integration. Whether that's on the planetary level or the personal level, they're actually the same process. So as we go forward then, if you came to the practice we did yesterday or the discussion we did today, and if you want, you can go to our website, drdansiegel.com, and do this practice, the Wheel of Awareness. It allows you to integrate consciousness. And we made a recording, because I know a lot of people asked about it, of the discussion this morning, and so we'll make that available if you want to hear it. But the idea here is that the Wheel of Awareness is a very simple practice where you differentiate the knowing of being aware in the hub of this wheel and the knowns on the rim, which would include energy flow from outside the body, first 5 senses, the interior energy flow of the body, the sensations of the body, mental activities like thoughts and ideas, like the idea of a separate self, and even our relational sense, this fourth sense. And the bottom line of this practice is I've done it with 40,000 people in person. I've recorded the results of the first 10,000, and it looks like, especially in this part here where you explore directly the nature of pure awareness, that 3 things arise from pure awareness, the hub. Awareness, this sense of knowing, this incredible sense of interconnection, and this sense of love. Love, interconnection, and awareness seem to be woven from the same state of energy. Now, what is that state? It's a long 100 pages in a book called Aware, so I'll just give this to you literally in 1 minute. But this is what my suggestion to you is that in physics, energy is defined as the movement from possibility to actuality. You can graph this out, and again, I apologize for how quick this will be, but you can graph this out by looking at this plane and saying, basically, you're moving from what's called a sea of potential, which is also called the quantum vacuum, upward into various states of probability. So, for example, if I had 1,000,000 words I could say before I said it, you'd be in the plane of possibility. And then when I say a word, it comes up into this peak of actualization. Now, this becomes very important because whether you're talking about what Michael Pollan was discussing with Dr. Keltner, in terms of whether you're looking at hallucinogens or awe, or you're looking at the mindfulness practices that Jack and Trudy introduced to us, or all sorts of practices, this graph here shows you that one possible view, it might be wrong, but one possible view is that pure consciousness comes when we moved energy into this plane of possibility. And that when you're aware of something on the rim, you're actually in higher states. On these plateaus, for example, if I say just words with an O, or in this case, if this plateau were just 5 of the oceans, it would be 1 out of 5. You'd have a chance of guessing there'd be 5 peaks that would arise from there. Now, okay, that's all the math you're going to get at this point. But what does this have to do with self? When people drop into the hub, they describe over and over and over again, this is the 10,000 person study, time disappeared. I felt connected to everything. I've never felt so much love before in my life. God, joy, awe. Why in a 25-minute practice across the whole planet would people describe this experience? Well, if the mind indeed is an emergent property of energy, that's the proposal, and if the self is an experience of mind, that's one way of looking at it, then this following cover story of Scientific American from July 2018 might give us an insight into what's going on, and you may have seen this. It says, "Crossing the Quantum Divide." Now, the Scientific American journal is one of the most conservative public journals of science that you have. And it was amazing to have this come out the month before Aware, because what I want to suggest to you, how many of you are aware that, in fact, no pun intended, but how many of you are aware that we have 2 realms of one reality that science has proven exist? Anyone aware of that? Okay, just a handful of people. Okay, so this is straight conservative science, what I'm about to say. When you have energy accumulations that are condensed into something called matter, remember E equals mc squared, basically that's a macro state. And Isaac Newton, 350 years ago, figured out the laws of these macro states. So it's called Newtonian physics or classical physics. Those laws include what's called an arrow of time, which means a directionality of change. If we break open an egg, you can't unbreak it. In the Newtonian classical macrostate realm, those are all synonyms, reality is experienced like nouns, separate entities that are isolated from one another, like you are different from you, or different from you, or different from you. We are noun-like in our experience of reality. But when you go into a microstate experience, small quanta of energy, like an electron or a photon, then what you find, in fact, is in this quantum realm of the one reality we have, there is no directionality of change called an arrow of time. It's timeless. And reality is more like events that are happening that are deeply interconnected with one another. So what I think is going on is that contemporary culture has emphasized the classical Newtonian macrostate realm to the detriment of life on Earth. That we experience life as a noun-like entity that is an arrow-bound unfolding of time, and there's an appearance of these temporospatial separations that we absolutely believe in. When in fact, when you get to the equally real realm of quantum microstates, you experience life as verb-like events with arrow-free unfolding of change and the interconnected nature of reality. So what does that tell us about who we are? Are we, your identity, are we these singular, noun-like things, so that when my parents named this body Danny, and Danny went out in the world and the body gets about 100 years to live, that what my mind is and what myself is just this singular noun. And then if I get into the position of running a company and I just want the bank account of Danny to be huge and I don't care about the forest around the company, the factory I run, and then I just accumulate, and then I have this noun-like victory. See how that works? And if I'm convinced of the reality of the macrostate world, then that's the way I'm going to live. So anything that drops us into the true reality beneath the macrostate is the microstate world, where I think consciousness comes from. So if you think about this conference, there's been a lot of talk about microdosing. Or even hallucinogens. I don't think you need hallucinogens to open up awareness to what our true nature is. Now, if that's needed for people if that's needed for people in psychiatric distress and facing death and all the powerful ways they're studying it, fantastic, fantastic. But awe and states of mindful reflection can get you into that hub. And as Roshi Joan Halifax beautifully stated, awe without compassion is not particularly a useful thing. So what we need to do is bring this into schools, bring this into homes, bring this into companies, and move forward in a way where you can be in touch with what the true nature of whom we are is. So you say, well, how would I integrate like that? Now, Soren and I were talking about this before, and how do you take the lessons that you've been having here in the practices, the information you've been getting, the conversations you've been having, how do you actually take this forward? Well, of course, you're going to follow your heart. You're going to do what feels right to you, and that's fantastic. If this information has been useful to open up a little bit, knowing that every day, every moment, just like swimming in the ocean, if you swim, sometimes if you're doing the breaststroke, you're underneath the water, and then you come up for air. Well, there's two realms there. There's the air realm and the water realm, and nobody freaks out. We can cultivate practices to easily, moment by moment, swim beneath the macro state air realm of things being like nouns and say, oh, I was nounifying this now. I thought I was a separate self. But all you need to do is drop into that hub. And when Dacher Keltner did a survey of everyone doing the wheel when we talked together last summer, he got scores on the mystical experiences scale from a 25-minute wheel of awareness practice that were the same as you get with hallucinogens. And yet it becomes just a part of your way of living from the plane of possibility. So the final thing I'll say is that follow your heart as you go forward. There are ways of doing it that are this way and that way. Wisdom 2.0 offers all sorts of things. One example of the many, many steps you might take is in April, for example, we are having a gathering of many of the people who you've met here. Conda Mason will be there with Sarah King. And Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams and Reverend Ed Bacon will be there. You'll have John Cabot-Zinn and Jack Kornfield and Trudy Goodman-Cornfield. And then we're going to have Tristan Harris and Louis Schwartzberg and all these people, Paul Hawken, because what we want to do is learn in the beginning of awareness-based systems change. So if you are here saying, I need some practical tools, there is something called generative social fields, which teaches us how to actually do practices in the companies we're in the governments we work for, in the organizations and communities we're a part of, to actually learn from the science of systems how to use an opening of awareness, how to tapping into this hub where you have people live from this plane of possibility. And when we do that, you're grounded in a me, you realize the reality of the we, and you can integrate your life as a we that is more like a plural verb than a singular noun. And when we integrate ourselves like that, when we integrate like that, the result is not only creativity and vitality, but it's kindness and compassion. That is the integration that is allowed and permitted and released when we integrate as a we. So we thanks you very much. And be well and integrate. Thank you.